Welcome to Buckets. This is Action Network's basketball betting podcast presented by FanDuel. Maria Marino back with you, and Action Network writer Jim Turvey is back with me. Jim, good to see you as always.
Yeah, good to see you as well. Last we chatted right before the weekend, a birthday weekend. I think before we dive into basketball, we got to get a little birthday recap here.
Yeah, so I admit I did not end up putting in a birthday parlay. I got a little distracted. Instead of watching Liberty and Sky, I ended up watching a lot of inebriated people around me. Not in my party. Like, I just had a few people that I met out at a rooftop bar, but I mean, 8:30 at night, people were like wrecked. It was crazy. I was getting nervous. I was having anxiety, but
getting after it.
Yeah, seriously, I had a great night. Didn't feel so great the next day. But thank you for asking.
Honestly, if you don't have time to be betting on your birthday, it's probably in general a good sign. So I think that's safe to say. Hopefully it was a good birthday.
Well, thank you. Okay, but I'm really excited because here on Tuesday, 9:00 Eastern on Amazon Prime, it's the Commissioner's Cup between the Liberty and the Aces. So if you don't know, the Commissioner's Cup was started last year, and it's essentially it's not actually technically the two teams with the best record, although these two teams are the top two teams. It's, there's a number of games throughout the season that are dubbed Commissioner's Cup games, and it's the best record in those games. And the top record is the team that hosts it, which in this case, of course, is the Aces. So the Liberty flew charter out to Vegas, which is nice. I'm pretty sure it's like the first time they got to fly charter this season. And the Aces are favored -7.5. And this is gonna be really interesting. So we've seen these two teams match up twice already. Back on June 30th, the Aces won pretty handily in Las Vegas, and then not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, the Liberty absolutely stomped the Aces in Brooklyn. I think that was just a very different game than anyone could have expected, given how dominant the Aces have been. But, this is going to be a whole new game. Aces have not dropped a game on their home floor yet this season. And, the total is at 174.5. I noticed that on June 30th, the score totaled 179. It was only 160 on August 6th, which it kind of makes sense because, again, it was just such a blowout that the Aces the whole fourth quarter was essentially garbage time, and the Aces just were having a lot of trouble moving the ball, scoring the ball. So that being said, Jim, what do you like in this game?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, like you, I'm just really excited to have this. It was your birthday more recently, but it's coming up on my half birthday. So I think I'm going to get my half birthday wish is that we just get a close game between these two teams, because we've seen them play twice. Both have been, one was 17, one was 25. So I just want a really good, tightly contested game between these two. I think there's a good chance we get that. I think, like you said, this has been around a little while now. We haven't seen a whole lot, though, to really know how much the players care about this. And players are players. Like, anytime there's a little bit extra on the line, you're going to see a little bit extra from them. And those are the games where, it gets a little tighter at the end. We'll talk about that later. And B, you just get that it seems like they play out in closer games more often when it really matters. So from a non-betting perspective, what I'm hoping for is a really close game. From a betting perspective, there's a couple different ways I'm going to be looking to attack this.
Well, before we get into those ways, I just wanted to jump add on to what you said, because what's at stake here, I really do think this matters for the players, not just for the pride sense of it, because look, the Aces were embarrassed the last time out against the Liberty. The Liberty were trying to prove that they belong in the conversation after all of this talk about the Aces being like historically good. But on top of that, there's a $500,000 prize pool for the players. And that's a lot of money for these players. And not to mention, they also get money for charity. So there is, I think, very, very real motivation for both of these teams in this scenario. But please continue.
No, absolutely. I think you're 100% right. I think that can't be, I kind of brought in the like, players are going to take a championship game more serious, but the financial reward is no joke.
Yes.
And I think that is 100% going to be a motivating factor as well. So, um, the first way I'm looking to play is more of like a sprinkle because it's a little bit longer odds. I am looking at the Liberty money line here. Um, if we look at these two teams from a full season perspective, the Aces still have a notably better net rating, offensive rating and defensive rating. But if we look at the last like 30 days or so, these teams, it's getting closer and closer and closer. The Liberty have really picked up the offense. I think that's something, we talked about a lot about the Liberty in the preseason. We talked about how it might take them a little while to have their offense click. It's exactly what happened. Sometimes it's really hard in the moment to kind of conceptualize those kind of big picture events that we think are going to be happening. Well, it's, we now are 3/4 of the way through the season and we have seen it play out kind of how we thought. So in the first 2 months, they had an offensive rating of 106.5, really good offensive rating. You have Stewie, you have Sabrina, you have Jonquel, you're going to have a good offensive rating. But in the last month, it's up to 111.6, which is almost the equivalent to the Aces and their incredible historic all-time offense. We're now looking at two incredible historic all-time offenses. Ironically, their field goal percentage is pretty much the same, but they're taking even more threes than ever, which kind of plays into why I'm looking at the Liberty money line here. This is a team with incredible, like any team that takes this many threes, and Liberty are taking, kind of leaps and bounds beyond any other team in the W this season per game. They're going to have some variance to them. We've seen the flip side of that in some of their, late blown leads, first halves where they just don't look like things are going right. I think a lot of that comes down to the nature of this offense under Sandy Brondello. They take so many threes, and in a make or miss league, there are going to be games, even if you have good players, that they miss. And there's going to be games like we saw against the Aces last time that they hit. So they have that ceiling that is higher than, ceiling wise, you can make a decent case that they have the highest ceiling in the W because the Aces are very consistent. They take so many shots though in that kind of 3 to 10 foot range. Just picture Asia Wilson there going to work, Chelsea Gray. Those shots are a little bit less variant. Liberty have this incredible ceiling where if Sabrina's feeling it, what really are you going to do? And in the last game, that was kind of the difference. Kelsey Plum really struggled from the floor. Sabrina couldn't miss.
Right.
You're walking down the alley towards a blowout right there. So I am going to be looking at the Liberty. I have one other play more related to total, but I want to hear your thoughts on if you have a lean in either direction for spread, money line, and all that.
Yeah. So you make a lot of good points. You brought up the improved offensive rating for the Liberty, and there was a note after the last game, the Liberty win over the Fever, that offensive rating is understandably not only better for their starting lineup, but like the best ever in WNBA history, a 119.3 offensive rating, which for perspective, and I know it's not as many games, but is better than the Golden State Warriors 73-9 team in 2015, 2016. So these starters, we knew coming in the talent that this starting lineup would possess, but as you mentioned, it's sort of taken time to not only build chemistry, but Jonquel Jones getting healthy, and I think teammates learning how to find her properly. And I think she's really changed the game because her rebounding has been just off the charts as of late.
And I'll say this. So I mentioned that they're taking more threes. There's two other smaller factors that are also playing a role in this offense being stronger. One of them is fewer turnovers per game. That just makes sense. That's just getting to know each other better. Right. The other is they're collecting even more offensive rebounds. They've had a huge jump in offensive rebounds, and that's 2 letters. That's JJ. That's Jonquel Jones going to work on the glass. So we've really, really seen a lot from her. You look at her stats the first half of the season, it clearly she was struggling to kind of get into the offense. It wasn't quite clicking. Now that they look like they have 2 former MVPs.
Absolutely. And, the thing that we talked about after their last meeting was the Liberty doubled up the Aces on both rebounds and assists, which I think, again, just goes to that whole point of, JJ giving them second opportunities. But you brought up Sabrina and her shooting. So she was 6 of 10 from 3 that day. And that's what I'm worried about when it comes to the Liberty is, are they going to shoot the ball that well? Are they going to shoot the ball that well at Michelob Ultra Arena, not in front of their home crowd? I have a feeling, or I should say, I want to say that, Sabrina, she showed that she's game for the moment. And, Stewie's just consistent as ever for the most part. I don't think it really matters, whatever the situation is, she's pretty much kind of level. But I personally I don't really have thoughts on this spread, because I think that the two meetings that we saw were so drastically different that I just don't really know which way this is going to go. To your point, I think it's going to be a much closer game. So I'm leaning Liberty plus the points, because I feel like that's just a little safer, because we do have to take into account the revenge factor. I think A'ja Wilson played one of her worst games ever in Brooklyn. She goes out not long after that, has a 40-point game, a career high, which, to your point, no threes taken in that. And then there's a rivalry here between A'ja Wilson and Breanna Stewart. And so anytime these two are going head to head, like, there's going to be talk, there's going to be chatter, there's the MVP race. And I know Asia's taken this personally, and I know that she wants to not only protect home court, but also just kind of stay neck and neck with Stewie here, and showing that, she's as good. And so I say all this to say I'm really having trouble deciding. And I think this is going to be one of those games where I just kind of sit back and appreciate. And I am hoping that we do get a competitive game, that we do get a classic, because I feel like not only do the fans deserve it, but I just think both of these teams, I want to see a preview of what we could see, in the postseason. And they're both great teams. Aces have been amazing. Liberty are getting better. Let me get a close game. And because of that, because I'm expecting a closer, more competitive game, I do lean higher on the total, but 174.5 still feels it's higher than we're used to seeing in general in the W, but these are also two really, really good offenses. So, yeah, I just have a lot of leaning. I'm just doing the casual lean.
Well, I think it is, to your point, I think it's a well set line. And usually if it's a well set line, there isn't, that much value on the money line either. The spread and the money line usually kind of move in unison.
Right.
But there are games with teams like the Liberty that are higher variance, where I do think the spread and the money line do diverge a little bit. I don't think, it's a massive gap or anything, but that's why I lean towards the money line, just because of the variance that the Liberty do bring to the table. But to your point, can Sabrina do that same thing from 3? She's probably not going to have the exact same game from 3. But then, there are, Stewie's had two not as good games against the Aces, which kind of leads into, kind of overall talking about totals here. It sounds like you were maybe, if anything, skewing towards the under. And I think, to your point, I mean, this is going to be a game that has motivation behind it.
Right.
These players are really going to be trying, and we see in the postseason often totals will be a few points lower than if you saw these two teams in the regular season, because it is just, we see it in fourth quarters, because in a fourth quarter of a close game, that's the most intense defense you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
In a playoff or a final like this, you're going to get a little more, that effort's going to start creeping back into the third quarter, maybe even second quarter of that really intense defense. So what caught my eye first is, honestly, when I saw the number, I actually leaned a little bit towards the over with the way these two offenses are playing.
Yeah.
But then if I take a point or two or three even down for what is a final atmosphere, I think the total's right around the correct area overall. But what I do think I'll be looking at is the first half total.
Yeah.
Because, to what I was talking about, the later on in these games, these finals games, these playoff type games, is when it really gets tight. So I think I'm going to look towards a first half over, and then again, probably more of a lean than the hammer spot, but then looking to see if live they kind of inflate that number and we're able to kind of go for the under on the full game and kind of, catch them coming and going if they go
Yeah.
off to a fast start. And if maybe things get really tight at the end, those are the two ways I'm be looking to attack the total, I think.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Kind of feel it out. Maybe a good opportunity for a live betting scenario. But to your point, you know, that value is on the Liberty money line versus the spread, obviously. And looking at FanDuel right now, it's at plus 265 for Liberty on the money line. And, if this game is closer, like we hope it is, like we anticipate with two teams that have faced each other now, that have felt each other out, that are both sort of clicking for the most part. If it's going to get to a close game, then the Liberty are going to have a shot. They're going to have a chance to win. And I do think they have as many clutch players as the Aces do. And so, you're definitely kind of selling me on the Liberty money line, but yeah,
Oh man,
that
can you
might
imagine?
be.
We have to get a close game. Can you imagine coming down the stretch again, like Chelsea Gray, Sabrina, Stewie, Asia? These are some of the most clutch players. Kelsey Plum, I'm leaving
I
her
know.
out.
I know.
Vandersloot has had some massive moments. I watched her
You're
rip the
right.
Liberty
You're
heart
right.
out last year during the regular season. I just really want a close game between these. So I know we'll get them in the postseason, or I think we'll get them in the
Yes.
postseason. But
And we have
man,
to
it'll be
not
fun
get
to see.
ahead of ourselves, but we also have to remember that they're going to play again on Thursday.
I know
But
it's
I think
incredible.
that's going to be depending on what happens Tuesday night is going to shift massively, what to expect for Thursday, obviously. So one game at a time. There is something I wanted to mention to you. Not sure if you had any thoughts, but they do offer on FanDuel, you can bet on the Commissioner's Cup MVP.
Oh,
So
that is very interesting. I
yeah,
hadn't seen those. Do you have some of the odds? You mind reading them off?
I will. So Asia Wilson is the favorite at plus 230, or the odds leader, I should say. Kelsey Plum plus 360, Brianna Stewart plus 500, Chelsea Gray plus 650, as well as Jackie Young, Sabrina plus 850. So what this tells me, it makes sense. Obviously, the Aces are favored, and the team that's going to win this game is going to have the MVP. And I obviously Asia is an MVP front runner on the season. Kelsey Plum is an interesting choice. We talked about she struggled a lot on the road. I think she's less consistent than Asia as far as, her production. But this is value across the board. Like, I really feel like any one of these players has a pretty good shot, maybe better than their odds are indicating.
It does seem like you can talk yourself into
Yeah,
any one of these being a
exactly.
good look, right?
Look, but also, if you think about the last game, I mean, Sabrina was the MVP of that game.
Yeah.
But again, it's dependent on super hot shooting, and she was not on the road. So I get that. But I don't know, it might be a situation where, again, you might want to just kind of sprinkle across the board a little bit.
Well, you know who popped out to me, and I thought when you started saying who you were looking at, I thought this might be who you were looking at because you've mentioned this person before. You mentioned this person as a potential regular season MVP before the season. Do you remember
Chelsea Gray?
Chelsea Gray? I mean, a
Well,
big time moments. Chelsea Gray.
yeah.
I'm looking at her numbers right now. She's averaging more points, rebounds, and assists at home.
Yes.
I mean, I can just see that old school style of hers kind of, or the way she makes her way up the court always cracks me up, but she gets it done and she just
Well,
kills people in the mid range. I don't know. Big game, Chelsea Gray. What'd you say her
yes.
odds were?
Plus 650. And
That's
she
interesting.
is, I mean, she really is kind of the engine. She's the calming presence. Even when like other people are like not playing their best, she tends to like be the level head. She tends to find her teammates, help them build confidence. Like, she's really like a steady force. And then how about Jackie Young, also at plus 650? And these are two players that actually played decent in the last game. they both had, let's see, Chelsea had 15 points, Jackie Young had 16. She was kind of, obviously quiet in the second half because that third quarter, the Liberty just pulled away. But, it's just so tough because it's not these are two teams that don't have like the obvious best player. It could be a different player on any given night that's the best player. But it definitely is fun to take a look at. And
well, one thing I'll say, and it kind of leads into the last little mini topic I wanted to touch on in terms of betting the game, but I'll say this, that the two biggest names, the two best players in the WNBA, Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart, haven't had very good games the first two times these teams have met up. Asia had an especially bad second game, but her first one, I mean, she shot it better. She was 6 of 9 from the field, but she only had 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 16 points. That's not that's a below average game for her. Stewie is shooting a combined 40% from the field in these two matchups. And honestly, it makes it, the reason these are two of the best players they are the two best players in sport is they do it on both ends. These are two of the best defenders.
Yes.
So if they're kind of canceling each other out, it does make room for a Sabrina to go nuts from 3, a Chelsea Gray to eat in the mid range and dish out 10 assists. Like,
yes,
I think the value might be on a little bit of the longer shots. And it's going to be tough to do. I want to see if maybe it gets bet up a little bit, but I might be looking to unders on Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart in terms of points for this game.
Okay, that'll lead us into, I do want to touch on props before we get out of here, but you make such a good point. Like, not only do Asia and Stewie sort of cancel each other out, they're guarding each other, but you always game plan for the best player on the other team, and your defense kind of revolves around that player. And because both of these teams have such a good supporting cast, it just opens the door for a player besides those two to really like leave their mark on the game. And so I think that's a great takeaway, which is I would probably lean just for value purposes, a player besides Asia or Stewie in the Commissioner's Cup MVP voting or betting for that award, I should say. All right. Now, really quick, there are props, that'll be coming out before tip. You said leaning unders on Asia and Stewie. Was there anything else that you had in mind regarding props?
Yeah, so those two would be points in particular. Asia has been doing better on the glass lately. If you tailed in the app, the last game was tough. She settled right on 9 rebounds despite being in foul trouble all game. But she's been, ever since Candace is out, and that's one factor we didn't really touch on, is that in that first game when the Aces rolled, they had Candace Parker. In the second game, they aren't going to have her. It sounds like Alicia Clark is probably going to play. She practiced today,
which is important.
Huge for them. Because that bench isn't all that great when she's not there. So I think I might lean. If you see an 8.5, there might be some 8.5 rebounds out there. I would jump on that for Wilson. And if 9.5, if you're getting more like -110, if it's juiced over 9.5. A little less likely, especially because one thing to note, and part of it is that the games haven't been as close, but the pace for these two games has actually been a little bit slower, and that maybe speaks to that these two teams are taking each other seriously too. You can kind of run up and down, flapping down the court when you think you're notably better than the other team. When it's like, all right, we got to take them seriously, you got to slow things down a little bit. So maybe which speaks to your lean towards the under. Especially in that, like I said, live betting that second half, I think things might slow down notably. So,
okay, so you're thinking Wilson potentially over rebounds 7.5 or so.
I don't think you'll see 7. If you see 7.5, definitely bet it. I think it will be 8.5. That is even bettable. 9.5, you're starting to get into more of a lean than a hard bet.
Okay, fair enough. Well, this has only been a one game on the slate, but it's a really big game. And, we've talked for a long time about this. I'm just so excited for this game to sort of set up, I think, how we can bet them on Thursday, how we can bet them later this month when they meet on August 28th again, and then how we can adjust our futures moving forward. Like, I think this is going to be a very telling game. just to see what these two teams are really truly about, because I don't think the first two meetings have given an accurate picture. And I don't think the first half of the season has necessarily given an accurate picture either. So this is going to be, I think, a really big, just a marker type of game that's going to like inform our bets moving forward. So super, super excited for.
Hey, Maria, before we go, I have an idea. We don't usually do this, but
Yeah.
it's like a one big game.
Okay.
I want to see if we can each throw out how we think, like a final score, and like, if we think it's close, final play, like how it ends, so that if we get it right, it'll be a great, a great moment for the pod.
Oh my gosh. Okay, but I didn't think of this ahead of time. You go first.
All right, because I was thinking it through a little bit. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm seeing 88-86, Liberty win. Jonquel Jones gets an offensive rebound, final seconds, put back, lay it in, go up by 2 with like 2 seconds. Kelsey Plum heaves it half court, doesn't go in. Liberty steal the Commissioner's Cup. That's what I'm seeing.
Well, it's a good thing that this is recorded, because if that comes true, I mean, that would be the most epic prediction ever. Like I said, I haven't given much thought, although I'll say this: if they ever offer first basket, Jonquel to Stewie on the first possession of the game off the tip has been like happening like frequently. I got to find out.
Yeah, they love that pick and roll with the two of them.
Yeah. Like, I don't know how many times I've seen Stewie just score off the tip this season, but nothing super specific is coming to mind. Like, I could just see this going any number of ways, but I do love a good, like, I don't know, something about Sabrina. If she plays anything like the way she played in New York, she is not afraid to take that go-ahead shot. But how neat would it be if it was actually more like a Benaja Laney, or somebody that we haven't even mentioned yet on this pod, or like I know we talked about Jackie Young earlier, but I could see it being, again, somebody outside of the MVP players that you think of all the time, being the one to down the stretch like make all the difference. So I know I'm totally copping out. I'm not like really.
Well, I've got you down for either a Benaja Laney or Jackie Young game winner. We're both saying it's close, so we both have called our shots there. And if either of those happen, I'm giving you at least like 70% credit, because you kind of walked through that. So you didn't.
I did. I know.
Didn't say it official.
I
think you should just commit, because then you get all the credit if it actually happens.
Yeah. I'll stick with Laney. I mean, I mentioned Sab too. I
okay. Oh yeah, that's true. You're just gonna mention all 10 players. I mentioned it in passing.
I know, but how much would like everybody like hate it if it was Sabrina that actually like came through again? Because I feel like so many people want to doubt that she's gonna do it, and then it ends up happening. So, all right, you kept me on here long enough. I was trying to give you an out. Now I do not have a specific prediction, but it is what it is. It is what it is.
Fair enough.
With that, I'll say thanks for listening to Buckets. Once again, we are presented by FanDuel. A programming note: Buckets is off this Friday. I am out of town. So we will be back next week. And just a reminder, if you haven't already, download the award-winning Action app. Follow @TurveyBets, because Jim Turvey obviously he's the best. Jim, thanks again for joining us.
No, thanks so much for having me on, as always.
All right, let's get buckets.